Yeah. When I got here, I said, it's been a long week.
Yeah.
Okay, I will call this meeting to order of the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union at 6:31, 3/25/2024. Any changes, additions to the agenda? Okay. Approval of the minutes. We have two. February 26th, 2024, and February 29th, 2024. And seeing we have an online presence, we're going to do them individually. February 26th, that was the regular meeting. That wasn't the,
February 26th?
yeah,
That was.
I guess I could open them. Yes, my memory.
I think that was the regular meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, and the 29th was the special meeting.
Yes. Any, I will take a motion to approve February 26th minutes.
So moved.
Davis?
Nancy seconded.
Nancy, you seconded it?
Yep.
Thank you.
Quick.
Any discussion amongst the board about the minutes? Okay. Think because we'll do I don't think we can do an I because anyway. Let's go around the room. My dyslexia has kicked in.
Oh, Ann?
And you weren't there though.
No, there must be
No,
another
that's
one.
Beth.
That's Beth.
Ann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Megan?
Megan? There you go.
Aye.
And Mark?
Aye.
And Beth?
I saw her say.
She mouthed it.
Okay, and I'm an I. Did someone else jump on?
Nope, it was Nancy, but she's here. You're involved.
Okay, February 29th, 2024. This was the budget approval. And it was a surprisingly long meeting. I will take a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Wait a second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? Additions, subtractions? I have to say whoever's doing them. Is that Katie? Who does the minutes?
Her name is Leanna.
Leanna.
Robert.
Okay,
Robert.
thank you. She
She's
does a great
wonderful.
job.
Yeah.
She does
Yes.
awesome stuff.
Ann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
I'm gonna call Katie, but I can't do that. Beth?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Megan?
Abstain.
And I'm an I. Okay, moving forward. Public participations. Public comment is not legally required, but we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our community members about their concerns over issues. Through these meetings, our board models for our students how to conduct public discourse, and that the board and members of our community can approach controversial issues in a civil and constructive manner and can demonstrate mutual respect. Having said that, please note that the board is here to listen. The public comment period is not designed for discussion. Please start by identifying yourself and what town you reside in. Taking a look at some of the policies and some of the laws and some of the intentions of public. I think past practice, public participation was for issues not on the agenda. I believe I ruffled some feathers during one of the previous messes when I waited till the end after all the board members had spoken upon a subject to call on some of the public. And the reality is that that really is going to be my mode of operation. Because I want this to be primarily a board meeting, and especially when I'm asking around about the opinion of the board. But in the end, I will be more diligent on calling in the public on that topic. So thank you for that spiel. With that said, any public participation? Carrie?
Hi, thanks. I didn't quite hear you. The sound cut out a little. Did you say you will be more vigilant about calling on the public
During a topic, yes.
during a topic on the agenda or not on the agenda?
On the agenda. The topics not on the agenda are for the public participation period. And after, not the last meeting, not the emergency meeting, the meeting before, I went through and read some of the goals within Vermont state government about what public participation should be. And I also researched past practice within this district on how public participation was handled. And it just clarified the formula a little bit. So there is one issue though, is that when there is a motion on the table, then that is the time in which it is just the school board to discuss it, the topic.
Okay, and then I just wanted to ask, again, this is Carrie Jewell, a Weathersfield resident. If, when it says in the SU policy, the chair will ask for comments on agenda items before action is taken by the board, that is before motions or is after? Because I was confused on that last time as well.
Well, that's a really good question there, because we've looked at, and that's probably something for the board to discuss, because the board worked on some Robert Rules steps, and one of the things we came up to was that to do a motion and then to on action items, to do a motion and then have discussion on it. So on a topic, you're right. If there's going to be a motion and there is public comment, then it would have to be before the motion, not after the motion. So that's a good point, Carrie. Thank you. If it's just something up for discussion, then it can be before or after. Does that make sense?
Not exactly, but so if it's on the agenda, public comment would be before a motion. If it's not on the agenda, public comment could be after the motions.
No. No, if there's a motion, there can't be any public comment. There can't be any public participation within the discussion. So, because there is a motion on the floor, thus it has to be discussed amongst the board. Davis, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, for the sake of clarity, and this is kind of how I'm planning on doing things at in Mount Escutney, is public comment. So, and I think just to paraphrase what you're saying,
Right.
the public comment section is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. If you have a comment for something that does not appear anywhere else, that's the time to make that comment.
Right.
For agenda items, and correct me if I'm wrong, when we go to that agenda item, right off the bat, or at any time before a motion is made to move into discussion, public comment can happen. When we're in the discussion portion of it, because that's the time where the board is discussing things, public comment is definitionally over because we are discussing a motion that is on the table, right, to be voted on. So what I would propose, if this sounds good, is just when an item comes up, at the very beginning, maybe that is the best time to say, does anybody have comments on this? We hear whatever comments there are, and then we move on, and that's kind of set.
Okay. And if it's something we're discussing, because this happens often, in which the public has a question based upon the discussion we have, then it really is up to the board chair to call on that individual. I believe.
Yeah, it's at your discretion,
Yeah.
I'd say. Yeah.
There's no legal requirement for public participation.
Right, I do understand that. I just am going
Okay.
based on the SU policy, was
Yeah.
what I'm just trying to clarify. And the last thing that I have on this is just, under public input on the items not on the agenda, of the SU policy. Number 7 says that every posted agenda will include instructions on submitting written comments to the board. I just want to find out how we know how to do that.
There's a little blurb at the bottom of the agenda, Bill. I don't know if that,
It doesn't have
Describes
instructions
it?
on how to submit something in writing.
or sent in a letter.
I think you just email
Yeah.
the board, that's what other people do. They email us.
Well, it says comments or questions for the board can be shared during public participation at the board meeting or sent in a letter to board members.
Okay.
Part of the public record.
Yeah, they become part of the public record.
Or they may
They
not,
don't-
right?
They can become part of the public record, but they don't become part of the meeting notes. They're not part of the meeting,
Unless the board chooses to address them. correct?
unless the board
Yeah.
chooses to address it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other public participation? Any board sharing?
Just everybody get out and go to your school board meetings this week. I don't know when everybody's is. Ours is gonna be Saturday morning for Weathersfield, Saturday morning at 10 a.m. And voting, of course, is April 2nd.
Manasquening School District is going to be this coming Wednesday, the 27th. There's going to be, and at the Windsor School, there's going to be dinner in the cafe at 5:15, and then at 6:30, we'll start the meeting in room 210.
Are you sure? I think it says 6 on the,
The meeting starts at 6, the dinner's at 5:15.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Can we make sure to have ample signage at the school on Wednesday?
Sure. For where, location-wise?
Yeah,
To route people to room 210.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also on the front door.
I remember last year.
I don't,
The
Mark,
back door and the front.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Mark,
back door.
ask Mark for information on our play, our musical that we're doing.
Mark, any information on the musical?
He's probably at practice right now.
I'm sorry. Am I unmuted now?
Yep.
Okay, so the 26th and the 27th of April, we've got Beauty and the Beast Junior going on at Weathersfield. We do not have the full orchestra of SpongeBob SquarePants, but it still should prove to be a pretty ambitious production. So we'd love for anybody who's got either one of those dates free to come on down and support us.
Yeah,
Thank you,
SpongeBob
Mark.
was this weekend,
Okay.
and it was very funny. It was great.
I have to say, I'm happy that I've become production invisible. I used to get the occasional ask
Oh,
for paying gigs, but I've stopped. People have
we'll
stopped.
keep that in mind, Bill, when
Yes.
we need somebody.
Heartland having another informational meeting? or not?
Heartland is Tuesday, this Tuesday, 7:00
Okay.
at Damon Hall. Yep. And everybody votes April 2nd across the SU.
Okay,
And I want to say we were 3 of only 8 districts that rescinded their budgets.
yeah,
And I think a lot of the other ones probably wish they had now.
yeah.
Yeah. I was surprised the number was so low.
Okay, superintendent's report.
Yeah, I don't know how I got in front of Tracy this time. Is that okay?
Yep.
Usually Tracy goes first, but. We'll
It's
do
always
it.
good to mix things up a little
Okay,
bit,
that's good. I just didn't want her to,
especially among,
tried to take her spot.
especially among administrators, keeps it
Yes,
fresh.
Keeps it fresh. All right, let me share my screen. Here it comes. Tracy's reports are just way more engaging.
It's true.
It is true. All right, make it a little bigger. Oh yeah, Katie has to go last today. No pressure, Katie.
No.
All right,
It's great, my slides as well.
here we go. All right, March 25th. Okay, 2 procedures are on the, in the portal. I know we talked about a procedure for procedures last time as a conversation, and I think that we need to do that, but I'm just gonna keep, procedures are always a work in progress. I think they can be edited, so we can go back. My charge this year was to get procedures done, because we didn't really have very many procedures for our policies. So happy to go back and revisit the ones we think need like a different implementation, if that makes sense. So those were the 2, non-discriminatory mascots, and that was really about a way for people to be able to make a complaint. And then fire and emergency preparedness drills, and that's pretty spelled out, so nothing extraordinarily interesting there. The question of the month last month was about what you really appreciated about your school. And so we had 32 responses, and I will share, there were themes. These capture pretty much what most people felt. That our schools have bold staff who take risks to do the right thing for kids. There was a lot of appreciation of the community events, which is a board goal, and engaging with the community, so that was good news. The focus on community, belonging, and the outdoors. Amazing teachers that love our students and strive to see them succeed at any goal they want to accomplish. There was some praise around response times from leadership looking into student concerns that are raised, and in general communication with teachers about their children and grades was good. Again, sense of community, uplifting our student athletes, the close community, the way everybody knows everyone. I like that you can't be anonymous in our schools. Feels that kids really have connections and relationships that span the school, and clear support and love for the students and their learning. I think that's coming up on my screen. But they're really positive. I think there was one that was a little bit, had some concerns about behaviors in the school, but otherwise they were relatively positive, especially highly commendable of staff and the relationships they build with students, which is one of our goals. So that was good to hear. For April, as you know, or you may have heard, we have student-led conferences at the end of this week. So we are going to survey our staff, and we're also going to survey our parents in terms of how those conferences went. I know some teachers are a little anxious because they haven't done this before, and we've given them grace to just give it a try. Our students have leadership portfolios, and they're going to use those as their guide to speak to their parents. So we're very excited about it, actually. I think we've had some interesting, just one more thought, Elizabeth. We were in kindergarten at one school last week and asking the teacher about how it was going to go. And she said, well, what we're going to do is the parents are all going to come in, and the kids are going to share their portfolios with their parents, and then the teachers are going to then have time alone with the parents as well. Yeah.
Someone's trying to
Good.
join.
Someone's trying to join.
Sorry, I was talking too much.
It's just me.
It's Anne Marie, so, okay.
We're all worried.
Yeah. Yes, Elizabeth, you had a question on,
I'm sorry, in all of that I've missed, when is the student-led conference that also gives time for parents to talk with teachers?
So I know the kindergarten teachers
Oh.
are doing it a little bit differently.
Okay.
I think there were some concerns from other teachers, and we said it's certainly okay to excuse the child and meet with the parents as you need to as well.
And just to reiterate, are these anonymized?
These surveys?
Yeah.
Angie, you can check that one. Angie created this one. They typically are,
Yeah.
so
I'll check it. I
just
think
check
it
to make
is.
sure.
You have to put it in your email though, when you're answering a question.
Unless
It
it's,
it depends on how it's set up.
Yeah.
So it's anonymous in the sense that if somebody gets the email and opens it incognito or doesn't use Google, then it wouldn't collect it. If they happen to just hit the tab and they're already signed into Google,
then it would collect
it
your
will
email.
collect it and it wouldn't be anonymous. So
Yeah. Good to know.
it really depends on the person.
Yeah, there's also a setting in the form in
Yeah.
which you choose collect the email.
Yeah, you can turn
So
it
This,
off.
You turn it off.
This is anonymous and it's optional to include your name and your email. If you want to be, like, maybe you want to make a comment that you could invite a response back.
Yeah.
So is anonymous, but you can share your name if
Yep.
you choose to. Okay. Awesome.
Are you planning to talk about the parent survey?
Which parent survey?
I don't know, the survey that I answered,
Oh, the 3D survey
maybe?
that came out recently?
Yep.
Yes, not tonight, but I will. We're collecting results on that one
Okay.
still. Yeah. Make myself a note. Okay. So I just updated, these are the anticipated openings right now. Currently, Mount Escutney has a few hires to work on. We're waiting, obviously, until the budget's passed. And Katie has updated the SU. Weathersfield and Heartland are in a different place currently. They don't have hires because of the cuts from the budget, the budget decreases. So I wanted to share that with you before so actually, we're in pretty good shape for hiring. We have been working on the hiring practices and they are linked in the presentation for you. I'll pull them up. Except I have to go to this tab. So this is in progress. We are not finished, but Tina, Larry, Tracy, myself, and Brittany was working on these, and we've made some good progress, I have to say, but we're not done. So the links are not going to be live for you, but you can certainly look at what we're doing. We have our statement about our commitment to hiring. We have some pre-work that we're doing with all our hiring committee members. So there's a little bit of work around bias, just to make people aware before we start the process. We have worked, last year we worked at one of our ad team, one of our full day meetings, organizing our job postings in one consistent location, so everybody has access to them. And now we're working on consistent job descriptions, which is not done, but that's our hope, is to get that done over the summer. Larry's kind of spearheading that task. Each group of people that we hire, there's a link that goes to a folder with the documentation that is needed, but we've really just outlined what we do currently, what our goal is, because we want to get better at doing this. So there's some of that. We really have focused mostly on support staff as of late, but we have a pre-screening process. We're making it hard for people that get hired with us because we want to get the right people and we want them to stay. There's an interview process. We've come up with consistent questions for the initial phone interview. We've come up with first and second round screening questions, along with what committee members should be looking for, listening for with those questions. And then we have a step 3, which is the second interview with HR or the next level supervisor. And then there's reference checks, which we've streamlined that as well. So it is a process. And then, of course, we have to fill out the HR notification form, which keeps our HR person, up to date in the loop. So, and then there's some onboarding things that we're doing for teachers. We haven't really dug into the teachers very much, but I think our process for hiring teachers was a little bit more intact. So it's a similar process. Won't go over all of it with you, but we have definitely have some things taken care of and others not. We do, I will say I'm very proud of our onboarding. We worked hard last year to create a really thorough onboarding for new teachers, to really make sure they have the information that they need. I've probably said this before, we don't have enough time with new teachers prior to school starting, so that is a goal. We do have mentoring. And then for administration, that's laid out as well. I did add make sure we have a board member on the screening committee from the get-go, as we learned from the last hire, and just a breakdown of the responsibilities. So it's a work in progress, but I wanted you to see it because we are meeting regularly and working on all the things to make it a really thorough process, but also to make sure that we're being mindful of bias. And if we're trying to attract a diverse workforce, we have to have some really good rules in place. Yeah.
I noticed, on the first section, I think it was for staff hiring, under the 3 to 5 year goal, you had, forming a pipeline from
Yep.
local colleges and
Yep.
things like that. But I didn't see that for the teachers one. And
That's because we just really focus on sports staff. That'll be a goal for all of them.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We've met, I think 4 times, and really now we're starting to assign tasks for people to do, and then we get back together and share. So, yes.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
When you have connect with Vermont Tech College or Valley, Vermont Community College, we have, I think starting this semester, the Grow Your Own program, or the legislature passed the bill, and so it provides free educators education for anybody who wants to become a teacher.
Oh, so it helps pay for their coursework?
It pays for all of their
All of
coursework.
it?
Yeah, and so
Wow.
contacting those schools that are providing that, or finding out who's providing it and
Okay.
how to get a hold of students that are going through that.
Okay. Well,
would be a good way to.
if we have, a support staff member just reached out to me, and she's in a program, and we've worked with our support. We've had a couple that have gone through a teacher program to become licensed, but it's particular schools that pay for it.
I don't think so. I think you can, I'll find the information
Okay.
for you. I've shared it with a couple of people
Okay.
whose kids are doing it.
That's
But
great.
definitely add the Vermont State College system to it, because I know that a lot of there's been a huge uptake in that system for that particular program.
Great. That's great news. Thank you. Okay.
We have,
Brittany's
and
trying
just
to get
so
in the
for
meeting.
your edification, we have Grow Your Own for teachers and for nurses. And that is for anybody who's already working in the system, in an education environment or in a medical environment. We pay for their education as far as they want to go.
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, I think Angie takes over next. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I wanted to skip over this one. We have a resignation. I can pass the letters down. This is Brittany Preston, who was our MTSS and data coordinator. Prior to that, she was our recovery coordinator. Prior to that, she was an assistant principal in one of our districts. Prior to that, she was a special educator in one of our schools. So she's been with WSESU for quite many years and has really helped move our systems forward in a positive way, and she will be tremendously missed. But I keep saying she's not quite gone because we do have her on retainer a little bit in case we need her during the transition. So I can certainly read the letter out loud if you'd like, which says, please accept this letter as notice of my resignation from my position as the MTSS and data coordinator with the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union. I am excited for a new adventure as I move into a leadership position with a Renaissance Learning Company. as an MTSS implementation manager senior. And then it goes into her last working days, and how she's going to help us have a smooth transition, which she is doing. She's truly enjoyed her time at Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union, and thank you for the support I was given as I continue to grow as a professional. I look forward to continuing to be involved and support the work of the SU as a parent and community member. So that is from Brittany, and I think we need to add that as an action item. It's not on the agenda. The board has to accept that resignation.
That's a good question.
I think you do.
Yeah.
Pretty sure you do. So my apologies, it's not on discussion items, or items for action, but, so I will say that Brittany will be incredibly missed, but she's left us in good shape. She's put a lot of things in place, and, we've talked as an administrative team, and our plan is to, Brittany was in an administration position under the Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Department under Angie, and we have decided to not hire another administrator, but make the position an administrative assistant to the Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Director, which will save us some money. Angie worked really hard on a job description, and she has a posting ready, but we wanted to bring it to the board tonight before we move forward. So, any questions around that?
Yes.
Okay, we'll do our best.
Within the support staff realm, within the contract, some support staff at the SU office have been encouraged, have been taken off the contract.
Yeah.
The support staff contract because of confidentiality issues. And basically, you look at each department, each school, that you have one admin assistant that is associated with a administrator, and they are a at-will non-contract position.
Yep.
That allows a couple of things to happen. One, it means that that person is not associated with the union, but it also allows to offer a wage that is slightly better than what's
Competitive,
on the
yeah.
contract.
Yep.
So I believe that I would look for, Angie, and your opinion on whether or not this particular position should go that route or the contract route. And I don't need an answer tonight, but I think it would be nice if you inform the board of what your opinion is. And
I mean, I'm free to share now if you're okay
sure,
with it.
go ahead.
I mean, I was thinking that this would be an at-will position. And
There's a lot of data that this person will be exposed.
Yeah.
Have
A lot.
liberty and access to, because a big portion of the job is to work within this systems, the data systems that Brittany worked hard to bring us. And then the upkeep of those systems requires that kind of access.
Okay. So basically, the past practice and regular practice would be to associate that at-will person with an administrator. So my guess with that, it would be associated to you.
Angie, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any opinion on that? Okay, thank you.
Sure. Are we good to post that position? I just didn't want to do it without
Yes.
talking to the board first. Okay, great.
Well,
Thank you.
I don't think we need a vote. We do have to accept.
No,
the
just that.
resignation, but
I want to keep you informed, so. Okay. All right, Angie, I'll move to you. Do you
Thank
want me
you.
to be your slide person?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here with a public service announcement. It's continuous improvement planning time. I think I might have given you a heads up at last time that I was going to be bringing this forward. Continuous improvement planning, you can switch to the next slide, is a every 2 years biannual process that the AOE asks us to engage in that highlights the priorities and goals of our supervisory union and also their school-based plans. I have to get clarity on whether or not the supervisory union plan, which is what we've done in the last 2 years, is our continuous improvement plan, is for the whole SU, and it aligns with our wildly important goals in the schools. So next slide, please, Christine. Thanks. Continuous improvement is about building a culture and a capacity for this kind of work. It is about collaborative inquiry, and it uses cycles of learning to monitor and document the impact of our strategic actions. Next slide. This slide just shows you the whole phases, and it's probably hard to read if you're on a small monitor, but these slides are included in the deck that is linked on the agenda. So you can go to the next one. So there's 4 phases, and the first phase is assess and innovate. That the assessment piece is taking our shared vision, which we have crafted a shared vision, getting representation from stakeholders across the supervisory union, board members, students, teachers, administrators, parents, and other community members. We can pick what broad area of focus we would like to look at the data for. The last 2 plans had a safe, healthy schools requirement. We had to do one for that. That was our Leader in Me work, and an academic proficiency goal, which was our also our Leader in Me wildly important goal around student learning and building proficiency in math and ELA. So these are the areas: academic proficiency, personalization, high quality staffing, safe and healthy schools, and financial efficiencies. And the leadership team would decide what areas of focus, as well as what the AOE has asked us to provide. So the innovate part of phase 1 is to identify a problem with practice. Then we look for root causes. A lot of this process is really looking at the data and brainstorming, well, what could be causing this result? And then we create a theory of improvement. It's actually very interesting work. And I would encourage you, if you are interested in that work, to reach out. My contact information will be at the end of this slide of this deck. And then we're going to look at ideas for change. So that's all in phase 1. Then phase 2 is testing and piloting. It's figuring out what we want to accomplish, then figure out if what we accomplished, we actually made it happen. Next slide. It's using the plan, do, study, act cycle. That's where you implement, and then you try to bring it across in a wide, you try to do it, I'm sorry, I can't articulate. What am I trying to say? You try to do it across the whole system. So you might start in a small area or start with a small thing, then you see how you can spread it across the whole system. Sheesh, sorry about that. And then sustainability is always something that we should be thinking about. How are we going to continue this work after we have done this implementation and determined what worked about it, what didn't work, what we want to tweak? And that's where the continuous improvement cycle continues. You look at what didn't work, what worked, and you figure out what you're going to do next. Change in education, as you know, doesn't happen really fast. So having a 2-year cycle to work on these things is a really, I think, is a short time frame, but I think we could probably see some successes. We're very strategic in what we chose to do. So this is where I would like you, and I'm speaking to you as board members, as well as our audience and anybody who listens to the recording afterward, as community members, parents. In the next 2 weeks, there will be a call for stakeholder representatives to participate in the planning process, and I will put out a calendar of when those meetings will be. That'll be conducted during April and May, and because the plan is due at the end of June. And oops, I think I duplicated that slide. It was so important. I wanted it in there twice. There's 2 ways that you can share your voice. The first way is to be a full participant, which means that you would attend the meetings. They will be virtual, that you will participate in the group discussions, and that you will review and read and provide feedback on the plan. If that is more participation than you're able to commit to, you could also do a consultancy participation where you agreed to review the documents and provide feedback to the team on the plan. That seems to work well for, I already have a few teachers that have committed to join us, and that might work well if you have kids in sports and things, because it's April and May, that sort of thing. So the next slide is my contact information. So if you are interested, please reach out to me via email, and I will be putting something in the newsletter for the beginning of April. And that's the continuous improvement planning process.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there a limit to the number of board members that would be able to participate in that, so that we're not like too many of us?
I don't think you want very many, because, I mean, I would like a representative team from across the supervisory union. If that is a problem that we have to solve, I would be.
Problem.
It'd be a great problem to have. So we'd make it work. We could figure something out.
All right, that concludes superintendent's report. Bill, you're up. Or Tracy's
I'm
up.
up.
Tracy's
Bless
up.
you.
Well, Tracy's up.
All right. All right. So I think there's some connecting themes that I will jump back to that we've already talked about a little bit around bias. So in just a moment, I'll jump back to that. But a couple of spotlights. Some of these are from last month, but the board meeting was before some of these things happened. So just wanted to give a shout out again to the Jedi Committee, Windsor Jedi Committee, for bringing Joe Major talk. I know I saw some of you all there, and to Tina Skehan for partnering with Clemens Family Farm. She brought a couple of guests out to Heartland that were awesome. Farmer James did a cooking demonstration, and then Rajni Edens is a poet. He's a writer. Yeah, he was at Roland Foundation. I feel like he was at their conference, last conference. So he did some really powerful readings for the school. So those were both awesome. And Clemens is also one of the groups who we're looking to partner with them a little bit more. They have guest artists. It's one of the only, I think, Black-owned farms, or one of the only Black-owned farms, historic Black-owned farms in Vermont.
It's the only historic Black-owned farm.
Yeah.
Did Rajni do, he does really great poetry workshops. Did he do any
He
of
did
that?
do a workshop. Yeah. I mean, he did his kind of call and response type things, but yeah, just came in and read some of his writing, which was really powerful. Yeah. So great. And we're actually working with Clemens to potentially have a guest artist out to Wethersfield in the next couple months. And celebrating Women's History Month in a number of different ways. And so this is somewhere I think over, into next year, we'll look to resource each other better about how these show up in our schools. But also, I think this is a great opportunity to think about intersectionality, right? I mean, Black History Month is February, Women's History Month is March. It's not like those are the only months that we only learn about certain groups, and also thinking about how are we uplifting all different kinds of women in Women's History Month, by race, culture, ethnicity, abilities. And so just thinking about how we're doing that. And then a couple updates. So we've now finished all the equity audit follow-up sessions in all the schools. We had 2 follow-ups. The last one was in Heartland last week. And so the purpose of the second one was really to share out. It was a lot of what I shared with you all during one of the board meetings about here's what we learned during those first follow-ups. Here are some of the themes that came out, some promising practices. So it was an opportunity to share that back with staff and have them reflect on some of the promising practices. And we had an in-service workshop. This was, I led this with Mary Guianan, and it was on March 15th. It was voluntary, optional, and we had about 22 people sign up. I was super excited about that. One of the participants said, well, where's everyone else? And I was like, these are the folks who wanted to be here, who were interested in learning and engaging in this work in a way that was great. And so we talked a little bit about some of what we'll explore. We're going to get like the 15-minute version of what we talked about over like 90 minutes.
Well, we talked because this is something that's been coming up, right? That there are things that are being said in schools and people want to practice and be supported and feel supported and how to interrupt some of the hurtful things that are being said in schools. So that was kind of what we focused on, which actually connects to what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to talk a little bit about bias. This was some work that I shared in advance. If you didn't do it pre, you can always do it post, so it's not too late. A couple videos, just knowing that, you know, when we have 20 minutes during these meetings, not a ton of time to really engage with the videos, but they're here. Some of them also connect to some of what Christine was sharing about how we're just starting to incorporate bias a little bit into how people are thinking about participating in hiring committees, right? All the ways that it shows up, which is why we're looking at how do we make all these rubrics that relate to the job descriptions, right? That can be a little bit more of a objective way, excuse me, more of an objective way for folks to review candidates really based on the criteria and the things that we're looking for and not get distracted by the things that are happening back here. So question bias, whether you did or didn't get a chance to review any of these pre-work videos. Oh, and I also want to mention that there is a resource list on the bottom of this list that was compiled by a community member and shared with the board. And I included it there because I think that like other topics, right? My sharing bias with you all right now is not saying that this is the only thing that we need to focus on. This is going to solve everything. There are critiques, there are criticisms, right? And so I think that a lot of those critiques were thoughtfully assembled by a community member and are worth reminding us of, right? It's like we want to graduate students as critical thinkers, and I think the same applies for how we approach all of this, right? And make our meaning out of it as we go. So I wanted to include that as a resource. So bias, curious just to hear from a couple folks. What do you know or think you know about bias? What comes up for you?
The preconceived notions that many of us really don't have control of.
Mm-hmm. Or stuff that comes from like maybe family stuff that, you know, you've heard like your grandpa say or something like that, or, you know, things like that. Yeah.
I think, as with many of these different areas, we have to get better at making mistakes. Like, you know, when a very easy example is when you misgender somebody and they correct you, you learn the lesson and you move on and you try to do better next time. And it, you know, seeing it as a continuous learning process that doesn't actually ever end. And knowing, just as we teach our students that you're going to make mistakes and that's the best way to learn from it, but actually learn from it.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
When I think of bias, I think a sort of parallel term to it is assumptions, right? I think biases are sort of broader based assumptions that maybe apply to, you know, people or groups or situations. Another thing that I find they have in common is that, and I think this is something that gets maybe contentious in these kind of conversations, is that like bias is going to exist just like assumptions are going to exist. I think that there can be this thought that when somebody like brings up bias and says like, oh, this is displaying your bias, it's like a harsh critique. And then there's that like, you know, it's like, yeah, people have biases, just like people have assumptions. And a framework is taking something that's sort of out of the, you know, DEIB realm, but I think applies to it, is, you know, in sort of team thought, when we think about assumptions, a pretty good dichotomy that I learned about a couple of years ago is approaching assumptions from a unitary control standpoint or a team learning standpoint. And I think that applies to this because unitary control, right, is that like, well, my assumptions are correct. And if you challenge them, you're wrong. And something must be wrong with, with you.
Right.
Whereas like a team learning stance, which again, I think, you might just be able to describe as humility,
Yeah.
is that, if, again, you are going to have assumptions, you're going to have biases, but when somebody brings up something that challenges one of those assumptions or biases, rather than reacting in a defensive mode, it's, like, I didn't think of that.
Mhm.
Like, maybe not in that moment, but maybe it's either you have a conversation or you think about it and you reconsider your own assumption or bias and move forward with it, whether it's between two people or in a larger group, it's you're incorporating that learning into how you
Mhm.
interact and navigate the world around you.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I liked was, and it kind of bounces off yours, one of these videos talked about hiring, and you want to have someone, it's said so many things that you have to think about beforehand because they're so true. That person looks like me, this person talks like me. And I just thought it was really good to see all those things that we do and to make us aware of it. So to make it far more conscious.
Yeah. Love this all. Thank you all for sharing. Yeah, I'm hearing, right, bias is something we all have. It's not like you can get it removed like your tonsils, right? We've all got bias, and it's a preference for or against, right? And it shows up in all kinds of ways. And when it's unconscious, it just means that it's happening and we're not even aware that it's happening. Like anyone who says, oh, this is like no judgment or judgment free. I'm like, no, where? Like we are noticing things. It's the way that we're wired. We'll explore a little bit about how that actually works in our brains, but like it's for survival. It's like we're wired to be efficient and we just can't possibly process everything at once. And so there's something about efficiency there. And I love how you're all bringing up humility and learning, right? So although we can't totally remove our biases, we can shine a light on them, become a little bit more aware. I think I've shared, right, one example of like being in a store and looking for the person who's in charge and realize I'm looking for a white man, right? Where it's like, I don't consciously believe that only white men can be managers in stores. I do this work, right? But there are ways, right, where it just creeps in. It creeps in. And so it's how can we notice? How can we notice and ask questions like, where did that come from? And then we can actually work with that. We can learn, we can shift our biases a little bit, but we're never going to be done with them. Yeah.
One of the difficult things I find is separating bias from belief.
Yeah.
Someone can have a pretty significant difference of belief than you do.
Right.
And that's not a bias. That's a different belief
Yeah.
on something.
Values and beliefs, right? Yeah.
So that's.
And I'm sure, bias is playing part of that too, because we're making judgments maybe about somebody else's beliefs or them being wrong, or however that shows up.
Or pegging them based upon a single belief.
Yeah.
Pretty,
absolutely. Yep. We do a lot of that. We're good at that in this country for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I appreciate you nodding to the fact that they're like the behavioral function of things like bias and assumptions is based on survival instinct, right? There's a reason that we do these things. It's not some sort of deviation in human behavior that we like have pattern recognition or like build notions of like how to navigate things. I also appreciate that you sort of immediately after nodded to interrogating your own biases, interrogating your own assumptions, because fundamentally, we can speak about these things in a group, and it's helpful. It's helpful to be able to have dialogue, one-on-one, but it's also really helpful just to build in some self-work practices, kind of have, figuratively like that mirror in your pocket and be like, why do I think this thing?
Yeah.
Because something, just to relate it to the way that contemporary society works is that, maybe several million years ago, our pattern recognition came from empirical experience, things that happened. And there's culture, there's language, there's things that people teach you, but, in an earlier epoch in human history, we weren't watching TV, consuming social media, being engaged in a 24-hour constant news cycle. We weren't being bombarded with information in the same way that we are. And that environment helps to inform biases that are artificial and not based on empirical experience. And that, I think, makes it even more incumbent that folks have a critical perspective of their own biases. Like, I think this, where did I hear this? You know, where is this coming from? Why do I think this? Engaging in that process. And, you know, it underscores the importance of having this in this group, but also in the roles that we have, because that's the kind of critical thought that I think we're all seeking to promote, you know, for our learners in our school community.
Absolutely. And I'm going to put a pin on something you said, right? Because I was originally thinking that we could talk about an equity filter or lens tonight. And then I was like, well, part of the reason why we need an equity filter or lens because it's questions, which help slow down, right? Any place or any ways that like our judgment and biases are coming up. So it's like, you know, understanding this, and then the filter can act as those questions that help put us in that place of curiosity. So we'll explore that either next time or the time after. Did you have something interesting?
Yeah, I just, I mean, I think that when we think about biases, we you know, several easy ones come to mind. But there are other ones that don't easily come to mind, and that, you know, I certainly know people who have biases towards people who have lots of money.
Mm-hmm.
Or I know somebody who has a bias against people who have beards.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is,
Yeah.
and thinks they all look the same. And the question is, yeah. The question is,
Gotta be hard for them.
what's an acceptable bias?
White beers.
Yeah, and at what point do you, you know, start thinking that, you know, categorizing your own biases and letting yourself off the hook about what you can chuckle to yourself about your bias towards people with beards. But at what point, you know, where do you stop interrogating yourself, and at what point do you let yourself off the hook?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a secondary level of kind of interrogation.
Yeah, I'm hearing something about impact too. It's like, what kinds of impacts are our biases having? And if you
Right.
realize like your impact's about fear, or, you know, there's some way that shows up that's actually impacting your life or your community's life, then maybe it's worth investigating or interrogating, I think, like you said. So we've just got a few minutes. I'll just go through a couple of things here. And then these slides you all have, but we've named some of these things, right? Bias is normal, we all have it. Different kinds of bias. It can lead to unintended impacts. It can't be eliminated, but can be mitigated. We have a responsibility to really minimize bias, or at least inspect where our biases are coming from. And so, you know, conscious, again, we talked about this. Conscious bias, you can say, you know, it's conscious, right? You're in control of that. Unconscious is like, an example I use is like, I may consciously reject anchovies, right? And say, I don't like anchovies, but like, I'll eat like Caesar salad, you know? And like, so there's something about that that's sort of a dissonance, right? In our beliefs and sort of how we show up. So at any given moment, right, our brains are processing about 11 million bits of information. And how much of that how much of those 11 million bits do you think we can actually consciously process in any moment? Of 11 million bits, how many bits can we consciously process? Let's see,
3,
10,
any other guesses?
11.
It's in the hundreds.
About 40.
40, okay.
So this, right, this is why, like, it serves us in some way. I mean, we can't, it's like if we were always inspecting every time we saw something that looked like this, like, what does this do? How do I, you know, it's a way for helping us get through our day, and we can catalog things. And so that way it can be a little unconscious every time I see this. I don't have to consciously think about a pen, right? So it's meant to help keep us efficient. And like you mentioned, right, bias can come from so many places. You mentioned social media. I mean, it's just, even when we're in the womb, I mean, we're being exposed to biases, right? It's in the air we breathe. I mean, it's ever so present. And so there's a way that it works, and I'll just share a couple examples. but I'm gonna share a word problem with you, and I want you to give me the first thing that comes to your mind, your very first response to it. Y'all ready? Okay. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Quick.
90 cents.
How much does the ball cost? We got 90 cents,
10.
10 cents. All right. Anyone else? 10 cents. 10 cents. Okay. Oh, it's not 10 cents. Because if it was, it's actually 5 cents. Because the ball costs 5 cents and the bat costs $1 more, so the bat is $1.05 plus 5 cents gets you to $1.10, right? That hurts. Doesn't that hurt a little bit?
It does.
It's a different process, right? We have parts of our brain that operate fast and not always correctly, right? We got the wrong answer with the way that our fast brain wants to work and make sense out of it. It actually means that we have to slow down, engage with a different part of our brain to be able to understand that.
But I still think I'm right.
I know. It's like, how many times I started that? I still think yes, 10 cents.
That is total.
So I'm going to show you an image, ask you a question again. First thing that comes to your mind, how many prongs do you see on this? 3. Yeah, 3. 3. Oh, and 3 is that fast brain, right? But that's not, I mean, maybe it's really 2. It's like that middle one's not really attached. Again, it's like, what is fast? And then where do we need to actually slow down and process? So we have 2 parts of our brain, right? The fast brain, that's like the mammalian, the amygdala part of our brain, the hard wiring for survival and all of that, right? It's intuition, it's automatic, it's effortless, it's reflective. It happens quickly. We have another part of our brain, right, which is logic and reason. It takes some time to actually think about things. Concentration, effort, patience, logic, reason. Fast brain is like 2 plus 2. 2 plus 2. 4. 3 plus 1. 4. Okay, 749 times 1,023. You know, it's like you've got fast, you've got slow. Some people can do that, but you know, it takes it's a different process. So when we think about our fast and slow brain, what % of the time do you think we spend in this conscious, slow brain, really processing things in a reasonable way? What percent?
Not enough.
5%.
Depends how much sleep you get.
Yeah, you're right, right? So about 5% is when we're really conscious. The rest of it is happening in that 95% fast-paced way. Where do you think our biases live?
In our fast brain.
Source of biases are in our fast brain. So we're making those judgments, right? It's because we're wired to be efficient and we don't even recognize when this is happening, you know, because we think we're being so conscious, but the reality is that we're not actually operating from that place of logic and reason and slow thinking.
But not
As
all
much as we
bias
do.
lives in that way. Some bias is actually part of the slow
If it's like a consciously ingrained belief, which is what happens, right? Our biases, it's like, that's like confirmation bias. I'm only going to collect the evidence that already supports the way that I think. And that's what we do without realizing it. You know, I'm going to make the assumptions. I'm going to reinforce stereotypes because every time I see a stereotype, it factors into what I'm thinking. So we can retrain that, right? By looking for counter narratives. How am I seeking out counter narratives that tell a different story that I haven't been exposed to actually then call into question, like, what do I really believe?
What's that term in which it's your social group? Can't remember.
You're no.
Well, I mean, one of the most dangerous things is that when an individual is within a social group that supports only a particular type of bias.
Oh, like a bubble? They sort of reinforce their own beliefs without.
Yes.
Echo chamber?
Does all sound good. So I think I'll pause here, but there's a lot of ways that it shows up. And so again, it's thinking about what does this mean, right? What does this mean for you all as board members? How can we think about the kinds of questions when we do think about like an equity filter, right? Is there one question? Are there 2 questions, 3 questions that we can be consistently asking that are going to give us that opportunity to pause and make, and just kind of check in, like, is this really the impact that we want to have? will this thing that we think we're gonna do, or this decision that we're gonna make, have the impact that we want it to have? What assumptions are we making? That's usually one of the first questions in an equity filter is, what assumptions are we making? And just asking that gives a moment, again, to pause and really consider that.
I think just building in, what if I'm wrong about this? Like, what if?
That's a great question.
Maybe I'm mistaken. You know,
Yeah.
I see that particular breakdown and I think of some particularly formative experiences that I had when I was working more closely in the special education area. And watching assumptions being made that had a materially negative impact on students.
Mhm.
And having to kind of see like, well, what is this thought process? Where is it coming from? And like, could it be missing some of that data?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
I'll offer one example to close out, is that somebody who's in one of our schools was telling me today about how there was a kid, a student, you know, who was maybe kindergarten, first grade, I think, said something that was a bit harmful around, it was like a gender, sexuality kind of comment that they made. And so this person was kind of curious about it, and it turned out that they had actually puzzled together two things that they had heard at home in a way that weren't, you know, connected, at least from their family's perspective. And so it was, you know, the person who was working with the student, like, took that time to ask that question, you know, sort of like, what do you mean by that? Giving that space to be like, oh, well, this is what we're, you know, and it's like, oh, but that's not, you're connecting like sort of disparate thoughts in a way that's actually hurtful. So, but again, having that moment to ask questions, be curious, and explore, where is this coming from, really created more clarity, right? It gave that space to do that. So, all right.
Well done.
And that, we'll pause here. Pre-post work, you got it.
Katie, it's all you.
It's a really tough act.
Follow that,
I'm
Katie.
just gonna say that. Please bring your expectations down for my PowerPoint. I know my limitations.
Use the full scale.
We will not be biased against you, Katie.
Hold on, I'm gonna try to share my presentation without sharing my scary, desktop, because apparently that's there. There's Christine.
tabs.
So many tabs.
Too many tabs. All right, so slideshow. Woohoo, okay. So, this is the second report for today, so before this year rather. And so the previous one is below this. This has been our slogan this year that we started out with, learning without limits. Continuing to work within that. Decided tonight, there have been a lot of questions about where we're at within the MTSS process, new referrals, staffing, just lots of things that all tied together. So again, this is boring. But where I wanted to give us some numbers of where we are and how we're getting there. So I put a link in here and I'll share the report out so everyone can have this. And it links to Brittany's amazing MTSS website that she built. And I clicked on it, which now it's not going to show it because it's a different tab. So let me just show you what I sent the next tab on there. Hold on, how did I do that?
This is why I can't understand how someone can function without a second screen.
Well, clearly I'm not functioning. So, hold on, where did it go? Here it goes, Resource Center. So I'll just share this quickly. This is where the link leads you. It's on this side is tiered interventions, level 1 and level 2. So tiered 1, level 1 and level 2, most are in the classroom, targeted interventions with students. Levels 3 and 4, which is more intensive, sometimes with our interventionists that are more locally funded. Sometimes it is with special education. We're trying to do an ebb and flow, and there's a really good communication. They meet monthly together and are sharing students. I think that's been helpful based on their own strengths and interests, and in all honesty, sometimes timing. So that communication has definitely grown this year, and we've seen a lot of benefit from that. So that we end up with that, and then we end up, we broke it down to like 4A, 4B, and then 5.
In part because once you get to 4B, it's that intensive intervention which may lead to an IEP. So dovetailing with all of this with our MTSS system and the new rules and regulations in special education, which I think I shared with you, I'm pretty sure a couple of times, but small recap, they made it a little bit, not a little, it is somewhat more ambiguous of the gates or the criteria for special education than it had been previously. Less of our information is made on strong cutoffs, such as the specific learning disability. There was math involved. You needed to be a certain amount of standard deviations behind school. Now we're doing more of a response to instruction, RTI model, looking at how students responded to instruction over time, or a learning profile over time. It's
That's
much
for
more.
level 4B and 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it is more 4. 5 definitely ends up being much more intensive, very small top tier. But the eligibility for specific learning disability is very different. That has impacted us in some small ways. The other is the second criteria for special ed, has to do with how is it impacting your education. It used to be 15th percentile bottom. Again, math. You had to meet the math. And if you didn't get into special education. Most of the time we were pretty good about finding areas, but sometimes we were not. The introduction in functional skills, which is everything from how do you interact with other humans, to how do you take care of yourself as you get older, self-care, to how do you navigate school, even coming to school. So some of those pieces, adverse effect has become broader. Therefore, it's much more discussion-based and less based on quantifiable data, which is hard. Go ahead.
To what degree, now that is an input, to what degree does it, is it featured?
Great question. There's not a quantifiable term for that. What it is much more like what New Hampshire and some other states look at, is does it have a negative impact is determined by the team. So one team could say it has an impact on a student's education, where another team in another building might say it doesn't, to such an impact where it would be considered disabling. So it's that consideration of disability and how that disability has an impact on their education. The third criteria has to do with what do you need for specialized instruction. That hasn't changed as much. What we're finding is students are being found eligible under our first criteria of disability and our second criteria of adverse effect at higher rates. And so our discussion has become to need. The reason why I bring up that need piece, and I realize now I should have probably had a slide for this and made it pretty, is that's where all of this, what have we already done? What have we already tried? What within our MTSS system have we done? And we have fantastic data tracking systems going on. We have students that are receiving intervention as soon as we know they need to receive intervention. So if you think about 20 plus years ago in special education, that's not what happened necessarily. Go for it.
To finish what you were saying, I didn't mean to interrupt. I wasn't going to interrupt. My intention was not to interrupt you.
Okay.
But I have another thought.
And you know me, I'm good with the conversation pieces, but then I am better with the presentation. What I'm gonna show you next is where we're at on the referrals. The thought of how we're dovetailing the new rule changes with our developing and pretty sound MTSS supports and intervention. In theory, over time, it will reduce special ed referrals is the goal. That was one of the tenets behind this. In process, we haven't seen that yet. I'll come up for air before I show the next slide.
Okay.
All right, I'm coming up for air. I'm gonna navigate the slides so you can ask while I'm doing that, if that helps.
Okay, so you're now looking at the criteria of response to instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at functional skills. So functional skills, are tracked by our education qualities, or education quality standards, right?
Some related, and that's just one
Like
area,
the little substandard
Right.
things.
and that's just one of the many, there's other, it's reading, writing, math, oral language, there's a whole bunch of adverse effect categories. Functional skills was always there, but ambiguous in some ways, not as
Well, I guess so
clear.
I know of a kid who, was able to access was bright and able to access the academic parts of their learning, but was socially and behaviorally a mess and with no functional skills. And that person, we had to really, or the parents of that person had to really make a case to have them really looked at for an intervention. And so I wonder whether that is there a change there, like taking into account those functional aspects of their day-to-day, not the academic side, but the other
Right.
functional aspects of their day-to-day classroom.
And that's where, so the social emotional and the accessing, being able to be within school from beginning of the day to end of the day and everything that happens in between is now more of the conversation that can happen with some more guidance around that. And I think that's a really good thing. Where the next level of eligibility comes in is, what's the specialized instruction at times for students that might be that way, that have met under functional skills, for example? It's a lot easier when they meet under reading, writing, and math. You have that.
Right.
It could be counseling, it could be other things that maybe things that we look at as a whole team. What I didn't do, and I'm gonna go to my slides so I can do this that way, is take here what I built for a chart, and I know that if you don't have this in front of you, it's probably smaller, is to look at where all of our categories fall. And I'm sure there's a way I can aggregate the data to look at where adverse effect is coming in. That I do know we have caught several, just anecdotally, more kids in. Our current state right now of child count and how many students we have is 281 students are identified in special education from early childhood through 12th grade that we're responsible for. So Larry left, but who's super helpful earlier, as I ran upstairs and said I need a total number, as I was trying to figure out how to present this. We have approximately 1,119 students in our seats here, but including all of the kids everywhere else, which we are responsible for, which is reflected in this statistic, it's a little over 1,300 students. Because we're responsible for those kids on IEPs everywhere, school choice or placed.
Right.
What is interesting, we've been through monitoring, you've all heard that, Ignatium. Between February of last year and February of this year, we've evaluated 68 new students in our SU. Those are brand new referral, and that has exceeded our average, because that includes the summer. By the end, if I did now through the end of the year, we'll be up from there. 12 students were found, 14, out of those 68, only 14 were found ineligible.
Yep, is now a good time to ask another question?
I do my math first, do my numbers first, and then.
Yeah.
Okay. So students that were already eligible, we have exited some. People always ask us, do kids get off IEP? And some do. We've actually seen an increase this year in revocations, which didn't happen often. It's busier this year, but a revocation is a student's like, I don't need this anymore. Tends to be middle to high school. And parents like, yeah, you're right. We don't need to do this anymore. And they sign off on it, and that's okay. it just dovetails with something else that's going on. We did have 18 students move. I would like to point out some of those 68 moved in. I also, we have just this year started tracking all of our 504s, because I think it's important. Those are also students identified with some disability. Approximately 87. Not everybody is in our system yet in EdDoc. We're working on, hopefully by the end of this year, everyone's paperwork and everything else is in there, partly because of tracking and keeping things on the similar forms. Out of those 30 new referrals that are currently listed as new referrals, 10 of those students have just been found eligible. And we are averaging between 2 and 3 new referrals a week right now. Our school psychs are really busy, and our speech language pathologists, OT, and even our PT to some extent, are fairly busy. And so what I want to kind of go back to is the MTSS. We can't say to someone, you have to go through the MTSS system before you're referred. That violates special education law. So there are students, because anticipating that question, there are students that have not been through our process, and we also can't say they have to go back. Like they've asked for it, we said, well, let's do 6 weeks of intervention. Sometimes we'll have that conversation, but that's not a have to. We cannot, general conversations may come up to see what's been happening, but it is not a have to. So even though we have all these pieces in place, so there frequently we have students that have not been through that process. And we have to still figure it out, which we do. All right, that was my Elizabeth.
I don't mean to hog the questions, but I do have a couple. I haven't seen you in a while to ask these questions, so forgive me.
Not sure.
Okay, so we've been doing this MTSS. We started doing MTSS before it was a requirement by the state. And the idea having been, and I think it was, we started with Karen, didn't we?
Probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the idea having been to front load the supports in elementary school so that there would be a graduation rate. And so my first question is, now that that's been at least, it's been at least 7 or 8 years. And so discounting the COVID part, but as a whole, my first question is, have you seen that decrease? You just said you had students graduating, but is that new? Has that been a trend that you've observed of more students graduating? And my second question is, how did COVID affect and the outfall of COVID affect all of this? And then my third question is, how would you rate where you are right now with MTSS? Honestly, and whether I know you've been correcting over time, but just taking a full step back, how do you rate the system of MTSS?
So I think the first question, have we seen a reduction or an increase in students graduating? I'd have to go back and double check numbers. I see a few more kids who have done revocations. I don't think it's gonna mark difference, and this is just off the top of my head, of students exiting special education. There continually seems to be an ebb and flow. In terms of front loading the early grades, I definitely see that. I think that that's been a wonderful resource that all the districts have made in each building on providing interventionists, SEIs, because it's social, emotional, and academic.
Yep.
I think it's been compounded, and again, one of the boards that asked
Just talked about
a question, I think it was Hartland's board, attributing things to COVID, and I said back to Christina, well, there's COVID, there's mental health, there's been aspects of staffing shifts, new staff.
Right.
It would be hard to point to one thing. I will say, based on our data, and this is a little bit of why I did this here, our new referrals are definitely coming more in the younger grades. than they are in our upper grades. My computer keeps wanting to open something else. Much more the early childhood through third grade. Second grade being the largest, and I didn't break it down by school because it would identify schools.
So early childhood through third grade is students who were now, were not in school during COVID.
Correct.
So
So not affected, not the academic part of COVID, not part of the picture.
Right.
it is definitely the 3-year-olds up through the 8, 9-year-olds roughly.
3-year-olds weren't even alive during COVID.
Nation's third grade.
Everyone's seeing an increase no, I'm saying 3-year-olds. We have 6 new referrals and 3-year-olds tend to be our speech language and we are seeing an increase. I think when I started here, the number was 23 students in early childhood. For our IEPs, we are now at 32. That continues to grow.
Wow.
That's a trend in everywhere. Not necessarily the population's going up in numbers, but certainly our children identify. Part of that's better screening tools.
Yeah, and some of the manifestation is in behaviors at the early grades. It's significant.
That has been, yes. So the goal with our MTS, I think we have an excellent system in place. I think we have staff that are very much committed to it. It feels, this is an I feel statement, over the past couple of years, we've got legs under us and we're moving this much more forward. And part of that, honestly, is dovetailing what we're all doing together and not doing things as a separate system. And that I think that everyone's been on board with in joint meetings and trying to support all students. That mantra isn't just like we say here at board meetings, we're doing it in the buildings.
Do you know where you are in the pack of the state as far as full implementation of MTSS?
I don't know. That would be one that I'm gonna look at you and who's Brittany.
Did she raise her hand?
I'm not sure we quantified where people have rated. There is a rating, there is a survey we fill out.
Yep.
At some point, we were just talking about it in a meeting not so long ago. I'm not sure how that data is used or aggregated to rate people where they think they are. I know what we've talked about where we are, and it's fairly positive.
We did a survey at the last
No, that's not what I meant.
MTSS, but
That's not what I meant. I'm sorry. I don't mean rate your MTSS. I meant.
no, in terms of systems and the things that need to be in place in an MTSS system, we used a rubric so they could self-assess to also determine it's a good time because of the transition with Brittany leaving.
Yep.
What we need to be looking at in terms of growing our system. And I think it's hard to compare from around the state because every system is different and every building, even in our own SU, is different in terms of the resources that they can offer students.
And some of it is driven by that, the resources in the buildings.
So I know it's time-wise, I'm watching Bill.
Sorry.
So I do want to share, and I can come back another time with the board's pleasure of going more in depth of where our trajectory and our trends are going as well. I thought it was important to share a little bit of what I shared with families about the Special Ed Family Collaboration Council. I won't read all the PowerPoints of here, but basically we've had 2 meetings looking at parent facilitation, setting up another meeting for the core people who are interested in moving it forward to get that off the ground for next year, but having the groundwork done this spring to summer. So a Zoom, the slides will go out to everyone, board members included, which would include parts of the benefits, lists to the SU, including to the board. One of the things that the parent councils, family councils, and other SUs have done is weigh in on things that have to do with policy, for example, that affect students with disabilities and their families, to give feedback. And have a group that would be able to do that, as well as some level of education to others and having a partner in that. And I'm looking forward to those pieces.
Yeah, without spending too much time on it, I'm really glad to see this coming together. I'm glad that we are one of 3 in the state doing this, because having that sort of structured space for feedback from, the folks who are the closest to the learners who are receiving these services. I mean, it strikes me as common sense. So I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say.
Yeah, me too. Who can join, anyone who's interested. The primarily is to have family maturity. I did, as I wrote this slide way back, I thought, we have to remember that we have a lot of staff who also are family members. So, and I pointed that out to folks, and that is part of the reason of really keeping it broadly based and not individual student based. One of the confidentiality reasons and others.
Yeah, and again, I know advocacy, and I just know this from having spoken to people and working in, special ed behavioral settings, advocacy can be really lonely.
Mm-hmm.
So again, yeah, this is fantastic.
One of the families who came, mom emailed me afterwards and she was lovely. She said, "You didn't add. My child met new kids at the childcare." She says, "They can't wait till I have my next meeting. You need to add that onto the slide." I was like, it was awesome because that was one of the things the parents talked about of being able to connect with each other. But then the students who came that night, they got a lot of pizza and salad and cookies, and games with peers. So that was pretty neat. What special ed's administration role would be in it, because it is not something I'm running. It is going to be parent led. Yes, participating, being around, but really working on it being a family led committee. Spring to-do list. The AOE survey's coming out. I think way back in the fall, I shared the results of that. It's going to come out. Families will get an email. We're going to make sure we get our high rate of return. This is an important thing that's tracked for us. High school students are attending their meetings much more. We're working on some self-advocacy for students, including having identified adult coaches in ACE to work on their own individual skills. And this is identifying adults that work with them, not necessarily teachers, but they feel as though it can help them work on particular goals that the students have established. And they've also shown some interest in peer mentoring and special ed. We're growing some leaders in that way, which is pretty cool. We've started interviewing the open teaching positions for next year as the anticipated ones. I'm just happy to say we have people to interview, so that's nice. And Summer Academy is in full swing of identification of staff. We're going to get notes out to families pretty soon to each individual building based on our data, as well as other data that we need. And I put the dates there that it's running. Angie and I had to sit down to do some really creative financial planning around that because of ESSER funds, special ed funds, and a mental health grant we have. So we did it a little bit differently. So students still get some field trip arts experience and around Vermont field trip experience to meet the mental health wellness aspect of a grant. So we can use that money wisely as in addition to still doing the academics. So it looks a little different and a little longer. And that was in response to staff last year. Now that we're having 2 sit-down meals, we needed more time for academics. But one whole day will be doing field trip days. So which is a way we could balance it and wisely use all the funds that we have. So I think, yep, that was it.
Thank you. You mentioned something about a nurse coming to, was that
Yes, she's coming for the policy, local wellness
this
policy.
week?
Yeah, she's here.
Okay.
Let me make sure she's still here. I did tell her.
Yeah.
Policies come later.
Stop sharing.
Okay. Before we go into policy, I will take a motion to accept the resignation of Brittany Preston with that's a good way to put it.
With regret.
With regret and
Sadness.
disappointment. Wishing her all the best.
I'll make a motion. Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Megan? Mark, you want to jump in? How do you vote?
Aye.
And it was
Beth.
Hmm?
Beth.
Beth. I don't see you up there. Okay, Beth. Okay. Megan?
Aye.
Thank you, Megan. Ann?
Aye.
Nancy? Elizabeth?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
And I unfortunately am an aye. And I wish her all the best. Had a nice conversation with her yesterday at the skate rink. Okay. Policy, C80, local wellness policy. Beth? Do you have a quick question?
Yeah, I have a really quick question, just kind of off topic, but when is our reorganization meeting? Because we have some new school board, we have like a new member for the,
Next month, because Weathersfield doesn't have their new school board members yet.
Okay.
So it's hard to reorganize unless we have all members from all districts, so.
great, just wondering if I missed something. Thanks.
C80, and we have a guest speaker, I do believe.
Yes, local wellness policy. Katie Burke is here. She is the nurse at the Windsor School, and she's worked with a team of people, WSEC. I don't know if we're calling that, Katie. We used to call them WSEC. I had a blank moment. Who took the guidance from the AOE and really crafted the policy with some recommendations. So I will let Katie speak to it if she's willing.
Yeah. So this policy, we basically resurrected the CDC's whole child, whole school, whole community group. So school counselors, school nurses, PE teachers, some principals all got together and just the first thing we did was looked at our existing wellness policy and then looked at the wellness policy guide that came out from the AOE in August, and then it was updated in October. And we met as a team and kind of took the AOE's policy guide and recommendations, put it into a draft. And then we sat down and met with, it was a smaller WSCC group. We brought in a parent representative. And then also, excuse me, Melanie Sheehan from Mount Escutney went over it with us. So this is my first policy in front of the board meeting. Do you guys read them like page by page, or there wasn't a whole lot that changed from
Can
the
you
old
define
policy to the new?
what it means by policy recommendations? Was so if you move forward, would that change to just being policy, or would it still say policy recommendations?
Can you repeat that question? Sorry, it cut out.
So you have two sections. There's, well, three sections. You have the local wellness policy, model school wellness policy, and then in a box, it says nutrition guidelines for all foods available on school campus. And then it says policy recommendations. Is that going to be like that in the policy, or those are just going to be part of the policy?
These
policy recommendation means, I think that would imply that these aren't required. Right.
Correct. So the policy recommendations, and maybe we can change the verbiage if people feel like it needs to be changed, but these are recommendations that if this policy is accepted, all of our schools would follow to enforce these basic wellness principles on all of our campuses.
So your intent is to have the, I'm sorry, I just want to be crystal clear. So
Sure.
The intent is that this would not be a recommendation. It would be part of the policy. So
Correct.
All the schools will, okay. So then that verbiage should probably change.
Should change, yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. We did develop a supporting document. You can see under the model school wellness policy, there's a hyperlink there. And I think some of the verbiage might be a little confusing because in the supporting document, what we wanted to do was really identify things that schools can do, parents can do, and teachers can do to support all of our, I think there's like 4 or 5 main headings there. And so we kind of took the recommendations out, put them in this supporting document, but I don't believe, as you've just pointed out, that we changed it in the actual policy itself. So we'll just remove the word recommendations.
Or policy recommendations, just have
Right.
it start with the heading.
Yes, yeah. I would agree
Nutrition,
with Elizabeth.
promotion, education, yeah.
And Davis, you look like you were thinking.
No, that clears it up. This is just, what's written under policy recommendations is just more of the policy.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
My question before that was clarified is whether that was procedures that would go along with it, but that's been settled.
Well, that's kind of another question I have. Would these be more like procedures than actually policy? But reading through these, they sound more like policy.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so,
I think we were just confused. What we were intending to do was provide a little more concrete information for parents, teachers, and schools so that we can take this local wellness policy and actually make it applicable in our school communities instead of just having it kind of exist out there as this verbiage that people are loosely applying. Does that make sense?
yeah, it does.
Okay.
And I think it's wonderful. I think you've put a lot of hard work into it. It needs some cleaning, of course, just on the text and so forth, but the intent of it, it's very clear the direction you're going, especially with the subheadings, which I really like Elizabeth's recommendation. So instead of having policy recommendations or policy, you just highlight those and bold those titles.
Gotcha.
The titles that are in the boxes.
Yes.
The titles that are in the boxes now, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay, Katie, thank you very much for coming. I do appreciate your patience. It's quite big.
No
Um,
worries.
I just wanted to ask you a question. So you mostly kept the previous policy as it was for the WSESU and just made a few updates to it according to what the Vermont AOE suggests? Because I know that policy was really crafted and worked on a lot, and I hate to see it just kind of thrown out and replaced with the AOE, but it was.
No, and it aligned pretty well, actually, and we have to have this policy adopted by, I think it's July 1. There's a
in this
date on that.
I'm kind of thinking this is actually a first reading. This is the first time we've gone through it.
Yeah, I agree.
Even though it says differently. But this is really the first reading.
Yeah, the last one you read was the old one, so
Yeah.
this should be a first read on this one.
And I want to emphasize to Ann's comment that my complimenting this is by no way criticizing the old one, because the old one, there was a lot of work that went into that as well. So I'm glad that was not just thrown away, because it was very well done.
So
Personal recruitment section.
So can I just let Katie, the board will come back with a second reading next month. If you have questions in between, just let me know and I can get them to Katie.
Perfect.
And thank you, Katie, for coming
And I'll make the changes.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe we can move this up further?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We give everyone the homework
To read it over?
Yes. This is a third reading of personal recruitment, selection, appointment, and background checks. Christine was kind enough to put in a recommendation last minute that I had discussed. And it's not a recommendation that I'm saying we should definitely do. It's a recommendation that I want people's opinion on, because we go through this every year, summer comes. So my verbiage is under appointments, one, during summer break, and when assembling a school board meeting is not realistic, the superintendent, in consulting with the board chair, subject to nomination, with the board chair, subject to the nomination, will have the ability to make the appointment. That is the, that subject, the board chair subject to the nomination it's that's stumbling language, but that's the language that's used within it before. So early in the policy, it says the board subject to the nomination, which clarifies, great to have a clearer way to put it. It clarifies that Weathersfield, for example, is hiring someone. You are the board that's subject to the nomination, so you would be voting on it. If it's an SU board member, it'd be this board. And so I thought that having it in the policy that the superintendent and the board chair of the nomination could then appoint, because each year we give the superintendent that power to do that. So instead of that, just have it as part of the policy.
So we don't need to vote for that every.
We don't have to vote for that ever again.
But it would be in consultation with the board chair.
Right,
Makes sense.
yeah, so it wouldn't, so.
Instead of saying subject to the
The nomination.
Subject to the nomination.
Because that's a very awkward construction. Why not say about the vacancy?
Well, the subject to the nomination, so how would you say, basically, I don't think that alone will make it not stumble, so.
But again, I also think that all of our policies should be written in plain language.
I do, I'm not disagreeing with you,
So that it's
but
understandable by
I'm
anybody.
very open to,
I think it's different it's number 7 on the back, right? It says, the superintendent of schools will be granted permission to hire over the summer by the board. All summer hires will be communicated to the appropriate district or supervisory union board. Is that what you'd said? Didn't
no,
match exactly.
And this isn't number 7, it's number.
It's number 1.
Under appointment.
okay, so number 7, granted permission to hire over the summer by the board. Also, so basically, I'm proposing to get rid of number 7.
Okay.
But.
I think we added that, Bill, after our conversation. I think we just put it in the
Number
wrong
7?
place, yeah.
Granted permission to hire over the summer by the board.
Because we did talk about it. And I
Right,
think
but that
that's-
doesn't give you permission.
Right,
It basically,
right.
we still have to vote on it.
Yep.
So I'm going to propose,
Would you mind putting it up on the screen?
Yeah. I can do that.
Get closer here.
Yeah.
We can see it. There we go.
well, I'm gonna propose to put this off, unless, if we
This
can,
is
to
This is 7.
make some language that
This
is
is
understandable.
Okay, hold on. Get it for
And
you.
I'm at 8:15, I don't anticipate us needing that language. Because I do agree with you, it should make sense. And there's a portion in the beginning that uses that exact same language.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to make that
Oh,
understandable.
maybe just in consultation with the appropriate board chair to the nomination, will have the ability to make the appointment.
So in the summary, the superintendent shall consult.
I think it should be will.
Will consult.
Right.
Shall.
Shall consult, but how do you define within the policy exactly which board and board chair you're discussing?
The entity for which.
Pardon?
The
The
entity.
entity for which.
The appropriate, what's
appropriate
really
entity.
appropriate?
Yeah, the appropriate board chair.
Appropriate.
The appropriate board chair.
Makes it simpler, gets rid of all the other stuff, the subject.
If it's an SU hire, then it would be you. If it's a Weathersfield
Right.
hire, then.
Yes. you have to infer that the appropriate board chair is, the one that the district is hiring, but in legal speak, inferences are appropriate. But it's I'd like to push this off another week,
That's fine.
another month.
Sure.
Um,
We'll get the language
yeah,
down.
just to get the language down at the beginning and this part and deal with section 7.
Okay,
Okay,
so this will come back next month for the final.
for the final, the third beta point 2.
Okay.
And where's my, what are you? Curriculum and development and coordination. This is a second read. And this is pretty boilerplate. We did add some changes to it. And that's the conduct systematic evaluation of all programs within the curriculum, report the results to the school board at least annually. But the point of this policy is to be in compliance with state law. That's why it's there.
I mean, I think that's a good addition.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any other changes jump out.
I think all shalls should be replaced with wills.
Will, where?
Everywhere it says shall.
Shall.
Oh, yeah, the first sentence of practically the policy and implementation.
Will,
I don't know the difference between shall and will.
There is no difference. One's really formal and
one's less formal.
one's readable.
I see.
I think this 4.
You found 4?
No, I did find 4.
I found 2.
And 2.
I found 2,
Okay.
but I'll have Lori look at it closely.
Yeah, I think that's a,
Just do fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's a good suggestion.
Yep. It's a good idea. You're right.
So I think, setting the next agenda, see, we're at that part right now. Definitely, I think,
We're gonna reorganize.
we have to reorganize, the superintendent's report.
Tracy,
Yes,
we've got, next month on the work plan, we've got the CIA annual report. It wasn't today. That was just,
yeah,
that was just the CIP. And Larry does financials, which is a quick 5-minute next month. Did I get that right, Larry?
Sent ahead of time.
They'll be sent ahead of time. Yep.
okay. And we will not add any other policies,
So just these 3?
just these,
Okay.
because after reorganizing,
Yep.
time's gonna be tight.
Yes, agreed. Okay. That's it.
Is there any requirement for executive session tonight?
I don't have one.
Okay. I will take a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved, I already said
Oh.
that.
Before we adjourn, I just have 2 questions.
Sure.
One is for Christine, just
Sure.
clarifying that, we're on vacation during the week of the eclipse, right?
Yep. Yes. We are.
Oh.
Yeah. And secondly, it's for Katie, I'm sorry, but just by state law, are principals required to attend IEP meetings?
We have to have a designated local education agency representative, and that can be your LEA, and that can be designated by being an administrator, a senior, and I use the term senior special educator, someone that has been vetted and that I say it's okay to them to be that, or myself or Kathy Mack, special administrators. Frequently, our principals do attend, but we have not found a way to feasibly get them to every single meeting. But it is
Which
not
makes
by law.
sense, but okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
By law, we have to have a designation.
Thank you for your patience with my questions. I'm sorry to have peppered.
They're great
Oh,
questions.
Elizabeth,
They're good
thanks for
questions.
the questions.
I'll second.
Okay. And it was appropriate for Elizabeth to bring that up because are there any discussion on ending the evening? All in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.